If you believe climate change is one of the biggest threats to the global economy, the latest findings by scientists makes for some worrying reading. Global carbon emissions are on the rise again after holding steady for 3 years. And policymakers gathered in Germany for the latest round of climate change talks fear the goals set by the 2015 Paris Agreement are slipping away from them. Now, the Global Carbon Budget Report suggests CO2 emissions are likely to climb 2% to hit a record high of 41 billion tonnes this year. That is the first rise since 2013. It mostly blames increased activity in China's factories and its growing reliance on coal. Carbon emissions in Europe and the US are expected to drop slightly as those regions shift from coal to natural gas. Now, findings like these are pushing scientists to look at ever more radical ways of reducing the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Some of these include sucking carbon dioxide directly out of the air with giant fans and dimming the sun's rays that hit the Earth. The researchers behind these projects say replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy sources just won't be enough to meet global CO2 reduction targets. Sarah Morris has more.
Plucking carbon out of thin air. That's exactly what this plant in Switzerland is doing. The fans push air through a filter which collects the carbon dioxide. The gas is then piped to a greenhouse to help grow vegetables. In Iceland, the technology is being tested in a similar project, but here the carbon dioxide is pumped underground, locking it away for good.
We are planning a scale-up of what we are doing, so a scaled-up CO2 capture plant. We can go up to thousands, 10,000, 100,000, and even up to millions of tons of CO2 per year that can be extracted from the atmosphere.
But this technology, known as direct air capture, is expensive, and it would take around 250,000 of these plants to capture 1% of the world's carbon emissions. Luckily, there are other options. Harvard University engineers are hoping to dim the sun by spraying sulfates into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight back into space to reduce the temperature of the Earth. And already underway is a technique known as BECCS, where biocrops absorb CO2 as they grow. They are then burned for energy and the carbon is buried underground.
BECCS is one of the preferred options for how we might be able to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere because it can offer a large capacity to take CO2 out of the atmosphere, but at the same time it generates electricity, which makes it more cost effective than some of the other options such as direct air capture.
Here in rural England we have a prime example of a biocrop. This is miscanthus, or colloquially known as elephant grass. And the best thing about it is it provides not only a win for the environment, but also the farmer.
So it's taken about 8 months for the crop to get to this height, which is amazing really when you think about it.
Will Sargent grows miscanthus on just over 18 hectares of his duck and mixed cropping farm in Norfolk. Once harvested, it's delivered to a local power plant.
The field we're standing on here is actually called the barren field because nothing would grow on it. It was just grass and rabbits. And this was a way of actually being able to grow something that was profitable, and also you weren't taking anything away from land that could potentially grow food on.
As scientists rush to develop these carbon-sucking technologies, they also warn they can't be seen as a silver bullet solution to climate change. They're expensive and complex, and they should supplement emissions reduction efforts, not replace them. Sarah Morris, TRT World, Suffolk.
Joining me now from the COP Summit in Bonn is Alzbeta Klein. She's the Director and Global Head for Climate Business at the International Finance Corporation. That's a part of the World Bank Group. Great to have you on Money Talks, Alzbeta. Tell us, what's the mood in COP right now compared to Paris 2015? Has the optimism of that summit given way to pessimism now?
Hi, great to be on a show with you. So the mood here in Bonn is obviously that of climate being a major threat, but it's also an amazing business opportunity. And what we are seeing here is much more of a balance towards the opportunity rather than just a threat. We have done some research indicating that this is a $23 trillion business opportunity today and more to come.
That is interesting because that, of course, is probably the way to push things forward through the market itself, which is what you're trying to do. You recently wrote about 5 ways to jumpstart investments in business that help fight against climate change. Things like greener ways of growing crops, greener buildings, smart cities. How are emerging markets adapting to these kinds of realities?
So emerging markets are at the forefront of these activities, and we are seeing what happened with, for example, mobile telephony in emerging markets from 1980s to today. They leapfrogged various technologies, and what we are seeing now in number of climate businesses is that they are leapfrogging that technology. We are seeing renewables now replacing grid connections and moving into off-grid, especially in parts of Africa where there is very little grid available. We are seeing climate-smart agriculture, which is developing in parts of Africa and parts of Latin America that feed the world. We are seeing it in green buildings because whereas a lot of developed world is already built today, emerging markets are building as we speak, and they are building green and increasingly building green. We are seeing that in smart cities. There are a number of cities in several emerging markets that took it to their heart to make a difference with climate smart infrastructure, whether it be bicycle lanes, whether it's a public transport, light rail, and last but not least, it's a green finance. We have seen here at COP the first issuance of a green bond by a small island economy, by Fiji, and we are seeing growth and interest from many emerging markets in this space.
Speaking of that bond, which we featured recently, the Fiji Green Bond, but what is the potential size for emerging markets debt over the next 5 years, for example? What sort of growth are you seeing there?
So green bonds have been growing tremendously in developed and in emerging markets. We have seen growth from about $70 billion in total to about 120, 130 billion this year. Out of that, emerging market is relatively small, but we have seen growth in issuance primarily from emerging market banks. We have seen Bancolombia, Davivienda from Colombia. We have seen bank in Turkey. We have seen a bank in Poland. So it is picking up. It is picking up very nicely, and we are talking double-digit growth in the years to come. We're just setting up one of the first emerging market bond funds for green bonds, and we hope to see a lot more coming from the corporate issuers and also from the utilities. And we are seeing a major hunger on a part of asset managers to come and buy these bonds because they like to green their portfolios. So we are seeing a unique opportunity of supply and demand working in tandem, issuers trying to issue, but also asset managers trying to get access to those issuances.
Alzbeta Klein from the International Finance Corporation in Bonn in Germany, thank you very much indeed.